and we're back. So before the lockdown I was in a different space where I had access to pallets. So I took apart a few of the idea of doing a project. And I'm finally getting around to it. 2 years later. So the basic idea was to take these blocks or a corner of the pallets, make a seat. I planned all this out. Poorly. So what you want for a seat is around $4.50 for a normal seat, but I'm going to make a small shop stool, so I'm happy with $3.80. But I only have 9 blocks. So the plan is to use as much collective piece of crap as I have in my shed and make the seat. And then I'm going to use, maybe not this piece, and I'm going to use the tops of the pallets to make the legs. So first thing to do is a bit of planning and layout, and yeah, then it's time to shape them up. I'll come back to you when I have that done. This is the rough layout I decided on. Again, I'm trying to get this roughly, the finish will be about 350 square. So layers are going to go end block, horizontal. I'm going to divide this. I'm going to cut this all the same height as the end block, make a glue up there. One of these. This is a leg of an old bench I have. Another slat. Then 5 of these, and I'm going to make another end block out of those. This, of course, is where it gets noisy and messy, because I have to take really? So I have to take these, which are dog shit, and make them square so I can glue them together, and so I can glue them to everything else. So it's time for me to retire to the planer thicknesser. But of course, you don't need a planer thicknesser, so I'm going to show you how to do that. Probably. Maybe. Now. Yeah, now. Right. So basically, what we're looking for to glue up is you want something that is square in as many directions as possible. So I'm just taking my engineer square, and if I cannot block the light, it's camera that take my engineer square, and I'll check size, and you can see there's a gap. This is a little better. That's it. That's a whole lot worse. So I don't have any square sides on this. So I'm going to have to pick the squarest face I can. I think if you don't have a ruler, is just use the back of this, hold it against the light, and you'll be able to see. So I'm going to call this my face side. And you do your face side and face edge, which what we often refer to as a little man. So circle down, your face edge is going to be his legs. Now, what I need to do then, take from my face side, this is a general marking rule, always work off your face side, face edge. I'm just going to score a line from where I want to cut to. And then mark down that edge. And again, I've also checked here, the top of this is pretty square, so I'm happy enough to use that as a reference edge as well. Same thing here then. I'm going to follow that line through like that. I'm going to go away. It's really hard to see that on camera, but I'm going to go and plane away that till the man's face and his legs match up. Okay, so we have our face sides, face edge. We're just working. You don't want to go with the grain. See if I find a good example here. So you can see the grain is sloping up this way on that. So we also want to plane in the direction where we're cutting off the point, essentially. Because if you go this way, the blade will dig into these points and pull it up. So I'm just going to work with my lines. This process continued for quite a while, so I'm just going to skip ahead now. Using it at a slight angle allows me to cut a little bit deeper on more rough material. So I'm pretty much down to my line on both sides, and by following that line going back, it should be square on all. Let's see where we are. I can already see we're not quite there yet, so we're a little lower on that end. See the light? You can see the light there. And we're leaning towards the top. So these are really just a matter of going back and forth, checking that you have achieved your square. I mean, sorry, you're not stuck. We're getting close there, so I'm just going to turn it down a little bit. Just take a little bit less off. And now, the full end of it, slowly work away that last little bit of badness in it. You can kind of see the sheen or something that's just freshly done. And that is close enough for rock and roll. So all you do then is you now have your face side, face edge, you give your little man legs, and then you follow on from there, always using those faces. So now I can use this face to mark how much of this I'm going to cut off, work my way down, and then I'm going to come from here to square that back. And that's basically how squaring stock by hand works. But that takes a lot of time and it's not much fun. So I'm just going to get out the big tool. Sorry, very much so child. Hello there. The principles involved here are pretty much the same. You use square base and square top. That's why I was checking with a square that the top of the fence is completely square. So just give that a little pull in to tighten it up. And exposing the minimum amount possible of this whirring blade. So you can see here I barely have that covered. Never ever operated without this cover, because that's going to cost you hands kids. So I'm just going to move this in. I'm going to do the blocks first. Now I've marked these the same as I've marked if I was doing it by hand. I'm just giving myself just a couple of mil curves. That means that no matter what happens, the finger can't get down on the blade. Again, this is set pretty aggressively, so I'm just going to take it about a half a mil. I should also point out that I checked that all the nails are gone out of all of this, because it messed my blade up. So when I zoom in here, you can kind of see where the blade carriage is. You definitely don't want your hands anywhere near there. Hearing and eye protection. Never forget about them. Because this is noisy. And you can get bits flying. You also want to make sure that you're going with the grain you can. And keep your hands away as much as possible. Just a word on methodology. If you do have a planer, I'm going to bring you down closer. Obviously this is a big spinning blade. So the key is to avoid having your hands over the blade as much as you can. or at all. On longer pieces is very easy. So this guy is an example. So as you're pushing it behind, and keep moving like this. When you get enough over there, you put a weight on this. Work your way through. Again, always avoiding the blade. Never inside this green area. Like that, you're pushing. Once it gets to here that you can get across, you're pushing it through. And that means that it reduces your risk. The same applies when you're going through the top. Exact same thing. Never have your hand over the blade. Now, because these are very short, I'm using a different variation of this, where I'm using my thumb and this knuckle. So I'm holding them up here and making sure to make fists with the rest of my hand. So that means that although I have good contact and I can push it through well, this is all the amount of sticking down the timber. As long as I keep that and I keep my hand well balled up, there's no risk of me hitting my fingers. If you were pushing like this from behind with your fingers down, you could very easily clip the top of the blade. Safety first. So, sorry. No titanium defenders, cannot beat them. So, the principle you're going through here, which I think I didn't explain well, you're using the same idea of the little man, as I always call them, P and a V, whatever you want to say it. So, when these come in, they're not, these are blocks that are cut deliberately to be, used for this job. So they're actually often kind of sort of like this because of the expansion and contraction. So what we're doing is we're taking the best two edges. I say this one's a bit straighter, and I'm marking that as my face. Then that's all I'm putting against here. So light pressure against the thumbs and forefingers to push that through against the fence, because I know the fence is square. Until, well, actually technically it's this way. Until I get this and this in line, and then I'm taking note of, normally I just remember of what side it is. So when I want to do the bottom, I'm putting this against the fence, and then I want to do this face, I'm putting this against the fence. That way you end up with as square as possible. Whereas if you weren't paying attention to that, you would end up reforming this rhombus shape, no matter how hard you tried. So just always remember, always work off your face side and fix it. Talk a little bit about the methodology I was using there that you would have seen the time lapse. So I feed them in one after the other. The reason for this is to avoid us on the snipe. I have a quick little sketch here I'll show you. So basically within the machine you have a feed roller and a turning blade. What happens sometimes is when the feed roller grabs a piece of timber, it can hop it up a little bit, and as it bounces, the blade will take a lump out. So you'll end up with something like that. And I'd love to say that's exaggerated, but that's quite a light compared to snipe. Whereas if you feed them in one after the other like I did, you reduce the risk. And I always keep the same part on the end, starting at the end, sorry. So that means the snipe only happens on those two boards, so I can cut it off. Whereas if I was leaving gaps, every board would get a little cut off the end. Now you can avoid that by always cutting over length, and you can chop it off, but this is a good method to And also one thing you may have noticed, it probably is hard to see on the thing, is I alternate where I push them through to make the most out of the blade, because if you keep sending it through one spot, which is a problem with this particular planer thicknesser, that the fence doesn't come across, you'll wear out the blade. And you can see here where there's actually a chip in my blade. That's from when I was doing the planing operation. So I'll probably pass this through the thicknesser again at another point. It'll cut that out now that this side is nice and flat. But just something to be aware of. Now all this can obviously be sanded in most conditions, or planed, and a lot of this is going to get chopped up. So next thing then is to start cutting things to length, laying it out, getting what I like, and then starting my glue ups. So after much fiddling and going through my bins, this is the layout I've gone with. So it's going to be end grain, side grain, side grain all the way along. This is going to give me about a 380 square top and about 95 mil high. So the next step is to glue up all of these individual strips and square them up, and then glue the whole thing into one joint. Now also, besides aesthetics, this crossing of the grain, so essentially our middle pieces, these guys, are going this way, and the end grain is going that way at 90 degrees to each other. That crossing of grain gives a good long grain to long grain connection, and also helps it stop racking and such. And when I'm gluing it up, I'll be very careful to keep doing this. Now this is not alternating, but alternating the grain. So along, I'll just pull this guy out. So along this, the tendency would be for the timber to cup along here. They'll dry more on the outside and then go this way. So if you put them going the same way, they'll follow one another, whereas if you alternate them, they will fight one another. Have a stroke like this that's a little bit mouldery, and you want to make sure you get it completely flat across all the edges. You just cross hatch it like this with a pencil. This works for any surface you're going to level out. So you're going to work away, which you're doing with a normal plane or whatever, until all of that disappears. That'll apply when you're flattening nearly anything, but it does help with this. So as this is roughly the midpoint of our video, I think it's time for a word from our definitely 100% real sponsor.
Hey you! Yes you, Billy Gibbons Goat Gruff. Are you tired of being about as attractive as a staph infection? Do you no longer want mothers to cover their children's eyes and pull them away when they see you in public? Then what you need is new OCD hair in a can. Transforms a baldy no mates like you into a member of society that people can bear to look at. You OCD hair in a can, crafted with only the finest ingredients. Grab yours before some other baldy no mates does. Warning, effective distance 200 meters. Do not operate within 3 miles of a naked flame. Possible side effects include loss of hair, loss of life, loss of the ability to sail or pee, spontaneous bursting into flames, spontaneous bursting into a song, inflated opinion of oneself, inflated opinion of inflatables, transference of your soul in completion to the demon behind, gradual, sudden, or instantaneous transformation into a goddamn sexual tyrannosaurus. OCD hair products is not liable for, well, anything, because we're not a real product.
Editing mic here. Turns out I forgot to turn the camera on when I glued up the top, and then did my run into turning the legs in another part of the country, but imagine I did. So I've now magically apparated across the country to the OG OCuana Designs, my dad's workshop, because that's where I keep my lathe. So I'm going to start turning legs, which is also fun. So I have these glued and squared up. So to turn on the lathe, we need to find a center point. The easiest way to find a center point on a regular object like a square or rectangle is by diagonals. So let us bring you down to the top. You can see here, top of our timber. And all we're going to do is get a ruler and go from point to point on the corner. So I'm just guesstimating because this corner is a bit wrong. Just like that. Just like that. And that then is your center point. And you need a center point for a lathe, because lathes work up the center. So this is my lathe. It's a really old record power, not quite as old as this guy who's hidden in here, which is a treadle lathe, which you used to use with your feet. I used to have a piece of documentation about that. By used to, I mean I literally moved it out of my way like 4 or 5 seconds ago. Ah, here we go. So yes, you used to work off a foot-powered treadle lathe. This is actually our first lathe that we ran off a washing machine motor. Super safe, not in the least bit dangerous. Anyway, so basically the lathe powered end here, which is what's known as your live center, because it spins, and again that's driven into the center point there. And on this end you have your dead center, same thing. The dead center is dead inside. Its parents didn't love it. No, the dead center doesn't move. So the keys for turning is be very careful. You always want to be coming in just slightly below the midpoint with your turning tools. And always use turning chisels, which have really long handles and give you a good grip. Or if you're like me and you own tools in the Victorian era, make yourself an extension handle for a chisel that has steel that's better than any steel you'll ever buy. Didn't buy this. It's my great grandfather's. The chisel, not the extension. I made the extension. So yeah, and this is where safety first is super important. You do not want loose clothing or long hair near this machine, because it will, as it rotates, I'll turn on and show you. So it rotates at a fair old lick. So it can grab your hair, whatever you're holding, and drag you in. Not very pleasant. So, short sleeves, sleeves rolled up. I will knot these and put them inside my jacket because I don't want to get pulled into it. And of course, I have my beard, knotted, tied up, so it cannot get pulled in. Also, just general, take the rings off. Ring avulsions, not fun, kids. But yeah, we're ready to go. And safety glasses and such. Face shield is also good depending on what you're using, but safety glasses definitely. So, with absolutely everything to do with woodworking, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And although, like, a lathe is a really old tool, 90% of people who just casually work probably don't have blades. So there is other ways. So I'm just going to have to do same thing, get your round legs with just plain, simple plain, cheap, handy plain. So we shall begin. So what you want to do is, as with method 1, the lathe, you're going to find your center here by going point to point. Point to point to point. Alright, I have my center there now. So if you take different, you can tend to get a more accurate dimension. So I want 15, so I'm just going to go to 11 and a half. So I want to just use the compass. Again, this is something probably everyone has left over from secondary school or primary school. So I'm just going to use the compass and get my 30 circle. It's important to get this nice and big and thick because you're not going to go all the way down to it. The thicker you make this line, the bigger the margin of error you give. So we now have these lines going through. I'll move you a bit closer. So we now have these lines going through the corners. And what we want to do is we want to strike a line where the circle intersects at 45 degrees. No, this is not entirely vital. You can kind of eyeball this, but it just happens such as a 45-degree setting on this particular thing I have. So again, where the line and the circle interact, you want to put a 45-degree line, and you want to do that for all of them. And like I said, this can be confusing. It can also just be eyeballed. Provided that it's roughly 45 degrees, you're going to be fine. So I'm just going to eyeball that one. So what you want to do then is the intersection point of those, you want to mark them down. Or if it doesn't quite make it to the edge, you're just going to mark down both points. So you can see there I have this line now. And I have a matching line on the other side, which you probably can't see. The lines here, I have a line on this side and a line on this side. The same general concept as I did on the other side. So again, get a 45-degree line where the circle interacts our diagonals. Strike her out nice and deep. And strike it out nice and deep. And again, and on the surface where that comes through, we want to mark down where those lines come through on the surface. Now the reason we're doing that is that's going to give us our basis for where we're going to mark. We're going to take out the material. So I want to move this side, so I'm just looking here. So I'll just take these two lines. Again, double checking they're the same line you want. So line up those two lines. Mark that for myself. Do the same on this face. There. There. Now for you can do one corner at a time to aid in your not being confused. And again, I'm going to just remove that mark. So essentially, what I'm doing here is I've marked this so I can remove this whole corner. Right? And then I'll do the same. I'll remove this corner, and then this corner, and then this corner. And that'll leave us with a square shape at the bottom that fits around the circle. Then we'll repeat the same general principle. We're going to take off this point, and then this point, and then this point, and this point, and all of a sudden then you have a octagonal that fits around your circle. And you just keep knocking off edges until eventually you get a circle. So you have your waist. It's important to mark your waist, and that's why I like doing one edge at a time, so I don't put the lines in the wrong place. And we just start working our way down, biasing towards the thin end, and we'll just try to hit those 2 lines that we've created, and again checking at the end that we're not going past the circle. Now this will be much wider on end than that, and it requires a lot of elbow grease, a lot of time. And like I said, you just keep knocking off these corners until you have a square again. Then you take off this point, this point, this point, and you just basically keep adding sides until you have a basic circle shape. Then you can get that out with just general sanding. And of course, on this end, because we want a flat piece, we don't want to come down quite to the line. We want to give ourselves a little bit of room so we can come along with sandpaper and the plane and give a nice flat 100mm. But here's the thing. I really like wood turning. I love this plane. Yeah, I'm going to turn this. Now for my favorite step, staining and varnishing. So burnishing, you just use the sawdust from itself, and it polishes the wood up to down near perfect polish. See the shine starting to come back. Okay, so I'll glue up my block. Now it's time to cut up the sides in a nice circular thing. So we're just going to put the Houston, we have a problem. Time to make a compass. Right, so this is one of those times where I'm going to make something very, very quickly to do this one job and probably never throw it out. So, I shall bring you down. Down, deeper and down. So, all a compass is, and that one is no missing lead, 2 points. Sharp point, which is your turning point, and a marquee point. These are all technical terms. So, I'm going to very simply make myself a compass out of this. Need the tool, make a tool. are we? Oh yeah, we're about to mark this baby up for some serious bounce action. The only thing I want to do here is roughly square this up. So yeah, I'm just going to take the front side here as my basis. Extend my line. So the point is to get us part of the square edge we can work off, because what I want to do is get the diagonal. The handiest way to get the center of any rectangular or square object is to mark what's known as the diagonal, which is the corner to corner. I can't remember the order, so I'll either explain this in better detail in a short while, or I already have. So I have, let's check that line. So I know that point is my diagonal, and this point is my diagonal. So I'm going to go there to there. That point's my diagonal, that point's my diagonal. So there's there. And that's as near on the center as you're going to get. So now, I want this to be a 380 radius. So I'm going to set a set square for half, or set my compass for half of that. So half 300 is 150, half here, so 190. So should have 190 there. Set it on your center. Don't let it hop out of the center line. And marky mark. Hell's bells and buckets of blood. Okay, so despite my calculations, we're slightly off. So we're going to go slightly smaller than 380. A concentric circle within that. How far this is rough, or my marker's good, and also I'll be cutting all this off. So let's see what I ended up with there. So 365. That's close enough for government work. Whatever. Rough. No, I'm not. I'm going to mark the positions and drill the positions of my legs before I cut this out, because I have a nice square base. When I shape this, I'm going to give the bottom a dome like that, so it'll be harder to mark it. So when it's still in the square, we'll mark up all their positions. So here I'm just marking up the positions of the holes for the legs based on my drawing. So I'm going with a 5-degree angle here. I'll explain that a bit better later on, and just making another use of my newly made compass. Important point when you're doing a lot of layout like this is to make sure that you delete any erroneous layout stuff. You can see here in a second I put a circle on the wrong point and correct it, but I end up messing up and drilling that hole later on, which you will see as I look very downtrodden. So now the time's come. We must face the final curtain. Not quite. So now it's on the board for my legs, and my legs are on a 5-degree splay both ways. So for that I've created a little jig, and I'll bring it down and show you. This is just a piece of scrap that I have cut on a 5-degree. That's not 5, no. Loopers. 5-degree going this way, and then on the end I've marked a 5-degree line going this way. So when I'm boring my holes, I'm going to reference this one side of my bit against the angle here and one against this. So I'm going to make sure to be in line with the mark on the block and with the block itself, the center spine of my bit drill. Now this is a give or take kind of job, doesn't really matter. What I could also do is set up a jig where I would drill a hole through and then follow with a forstner bit but I'm using a spade bit, and spade bits tend to rip the crap out of that. So this is kind of the best way to do it. If it was straight, I'd probably just dye it. So, the important lesson to remember is to always have your layout and your lines you're going to act upon very different. Or about your layout lines if you can. Because you might do something stupid like I did and drill a hole in the wrong place. Tea. I think I need tea. Right, so now I'm trying to smooth out the inside of the curve on the top. So I just scratched all along this with a pencil. I'm going to work away all the pencil marks. So ideally when all the pencil marks are gone, that means I have no dips or hollows anymore.
Oh yeah, carving time. For reference, this is at 100 speed. Took a very, very long time. But anyway, here's some music.
Oh, hello there. So I've had a lot of hours more sanding and fettling and filing to get this to the shape I want. When you're doing this, I cannot heavily recommend one of these enough. This is known as a Japanese saw rasp. So on one side it has really coarse saw teeth, on the other side it has finer saw teeth. But it just eats timber. It's perfect for this kind of shaping where I'm working this down to the edge and getting this done the way I want it. Finally. So this is sanded. I'm very glad I'm not going to make you watch the hours and hours of sanding to get it to where I want it to. It's time, as the Spice Girl said, for two to become one. So for putting this together, I'm going with very traditional leg type for stools. So essentially what I'm going to do is, as I've done here, is cut a groove in the end of this and then just show on when it's hammered in. I'm going to put a wedge in. This is a piece of teak which gives a nice colour difference. As you hammer in said wedge, it spreads out the top and locks it in place. Now because these are made of two pieces, when I turned them, because I didn't have anything thick enough in my batch, I'm being very careful to mark the line of where the joint is, and doing that cut at a 90-degree angle to that, because if I put the line here, all that'll happen is it'll separate the glue joint. This way it's pushing against higher timber. So do the bandsaw to do all of that. What are you doing all the way over there? This is the fun part. Come on! So now it's glue up time. So, along with the mark on the top, I put a mark on the bottom here. So as I'm hammering it in, I'm going to keep them at roughly a 45-degree angle to these spurs going in. So, sorry, cheap brush I've cut down. I like to paint these kind of things so it's messy. And just simple white wood glue, because it can be walked. Simple white wood glue can be washed away just with a cloth. A damp cloth. So I'm just going to soak all the inside of this joint. Ensure I get everywhere. There will be squeeze out, but it's better to have too much than too little.
So to get level legs, all you need is a piece of timber and a marker. I'm going to show you that now.
So you have your piece of timber, use the same height everywhere, get it settled, use a marker along. I'm using a marker because it gives a nice line, and I'm going to take a bit off the edges as well. So just wedge where it looks flat, you mark along, and that will give you, on all four legs I'm keeping this the same, that'll set flat and also matches the angle of the ground. Now, important when you're doing legs or anything is you don't want it to chip out and break. So what I'll be doing is when I have these cut to size, I'll be wasn't arsing the edges. So just show on a piece of scrap. So I'm just going to cut the corners off all the edges. If we imagine this is the bottom of your leg, this place anything that's going on the ground. And it just stops the edge catching or breaking off. So I'll probably be doing that with a sander for these. But I'm going to finish marking them up, I'm going to cut them, and then that'll be that. Time for sanding and finishing. Forgot to film this, but all I did was cut these as close to the surface as I could, and then I chiseled them flat with a mallet and a chisel. I'll then go over the whole top again with all the grits I have. That's the finest grit to get everything nice and smooth for sitting. You don't want splinters in your ass!
Now for my favourite part, adding the finish. So for this I'm using just a Danish oil because it's going to be in my workshop. You can see how all those different grains and different grain directions really light up. So I'm going to let myself finish that with a bit of music. And this is the final product. I mean, overall I'm quite happy with it for what it is. There are a few things that I would like to change, like not putting the hole in the wrong place, and one of the legs is slightly askew. But I've been sitting on this and standing on this for about 2 weeks now, and solid as a rock.